Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I've got a Glock 45 on the table, and what I've really got is a Glock with a serious identity crisis. The model is 45, but it's chambered in 9mm. It has a lot of the features of the Gen 5, but neither the sight nor the gun actually label a generation, so it doesn't say Gen 5, but the box it came in said Gen 5. And we're going to treat it as a Gen 5 because it really is. With the features it's got and the way it's set up, it's basically a Gen 5. So it came with 3 of these 17-round magazines. And you might wonder, well, okay, 17 round. Well, it's got a Glock 17 grip and frame, but it's got a Glock 19 slide. So is it a Glock 19X in black? Well, not really, because it's got a few features that are different than the Glock 19X. It has forward serrations, or front serrations, kind of like the Glock Gen 4, Glock 19 Gen 4 Summer Special did. So for those press check guys, you've got everything you need to do your press checks. And of course it has the standard rear serrations as well. It does have the interchangeable backstraps, like any of the other later generation Glocks. It comes with 2, which actually gives you a total of 3. The frame itself with no backstrap is equivalent to like an SF, a short frame, and then you can put a medium or large backstrap on it. There are no finger grooves, which is one of the features of the Gen 5. And of course it does have a relatively aggressive stippling, but it's not uncomfortable to hold. It doesn't bite into you, it doesn't scratch you, it doesn't leave little, you can see a little impressions where I was holding it, you can see a little print there, but it doesn't leave your hand sore or in any way beat up. It does have a reversible mag catch, like all of the Generation 4 and newer, but notice that. It actually has ambidextrous slide stop slide release, which is characteristic of the Gen 5s, but not on any of the other prior guns. It's got their newer finish, which is a black nitride finish, and it actually really looks nice. It's a deep, rich black. There are a few things with the barrel where it does wear, but it's a penetrating finish, so it's not going to, even if it does wear, it's still going to protect the metal. You're not going to have any problems with rusting or anything else. This particular one came with the typical Glock 3-dot sights. Now this one is a blue label, which is law enforcement and GSSF. So this one was $420. The MSRP on them is around $650, and you're likely going to be able to find them, on the retail market for around $550 pretty much anywhere. So they're going to be $20-25 more than the prior generations, which seems to be the pattern. When the Gen 4s came out, they were $20-25 more than a Gen 3, and these are just kind of continuing along with that pattern. Typical Glock single rail, single slot rail, and of course that's not a problem. The aftermarket has so well caught up with Glock that I don't care what it is you want to hang off this thing, it'll have an adapter or some mechanism to work with that Glock structure. And typical of all the other Glocks, it does have a little bit of grooves on the right there on the trigger guard, and a little curve if you want to put your fingers there. Now, one thing I failed to do for you guys, now of course we do safety check every gun before we start, but it is unloaded. Normally I try to do that right at the beginning of the video and I got distracted, but both Hammer and I safety check every gun that comes on the table, so we know that they're unloaded when we start. Disassembly of this, which I'll show you in a little bit, is no different than any other Glock out there. Now one thing I did mention is it's got a Glock 17 frame, which means it has a full-size grip, which means, of course, 17-round magazines fit right in it. Now these are the Gen 5 magazines with a little bit of curvature to them. Now it will also easily accept the magazines that come with the 19X. If you happen to have a 19X, they'll work. A little bit of a gap there, but Glock has never really done the extender thing as well as some other companies like Walther and the Springfield XDM series, but it does work well, and there's no risk of getting pinched on this because even unless you've got huge hands, and even then the gap is kind of refined, so you're not really going to get pinched. And of course you can put all the other too scary to talk about magazines in it that I can't talk about on YouTube or even show you, but it'll fit all of them like any other Glock. Any magazine that's at least as long as the grip or longer will work perfectly in it. So Gen 4, Gen 3, and all the other stuff will just plug right in and work. So let's talk about the dimensions of it. It's 7.44 inches long, pretty much consistent with a Glock 19. It's 5.47 inches tall, which would be consistent with a Glock 17, and it lists as 1.34 wide. Now you might say, well, that's a lot wider than a Glock, so they made the thing fatter. Well, really they didn't. You know, when you go to the widest point, these side stop slide releases are going to be the widest point, so they added some thickness to it. The slide is 1 inch like any of the other 9mm out there. So it's really not any bigger than a 19X or a Glock 17 or any of the others, other than the obvious dimensions that are different because of the model. They're targeting, you know, home defense, range. It's a wonderful range gun. This thing is so easy to shoot well. And you can use it for concealed carry. I mean, it'd be no different than carrying like a 1911, and people have done that for years. However, for actual true concealed carry, a 19 might be a better choice than this. But one thing that we will find, we took this to the range several times, and every time we took it to the range, took it with a group, every time I walked up to the line and picked this thing up, it was warm. So it got a lot of loving, and it really attracts people. And no matter who picked it up, they were actually able to shoot it well more easily than some of the guns they actually brought themselves. So it really is a good choice if that's what you're looking for. You know, range, competition, and you know, some concealed carry if you're willing to dress a little bit to kind of hide this larger grip. The last two specs before we get this thing taken apart, it's got a 4.02 inch barrel, and it is the Glock Marksman barrel, which I'll show you when I get it apart, but it's basically a hybrid between the polygonal rifling Glock uses and conventional rifling that they're putting on all the Gen 5s in their newer guns. It weighs 21.73 ounces like you see it right here. Slap an empty magazine in it, it's 24.98 ounces. So it's not a really heavy gun. It's heavier than a 19 obviously, but it's not really a heavy gun. So let's get this thing apart, which is easy to do. Of course, you verify it's clear, pull the trigger, kind of squeeze it from the back a little bit, pull down the tabs, and it comes right apart. So let's start with the frame, since I happen to have that in my hand. If I just showed you the frame, you wouldn't really be able to tell what generation it is unless you look here at the sear. The sear is just a hair different. Instead of being a one smooth plate, it's a plate with another thing hooked over it. That's really the only visible difference on these, obviously other than the grip. But if I was just looking at the internal mechanics of it, you wouldn't really be able to tell this from a Gen 4, and not really a whole lot has changed, other than, of course, the ambi slide release, which one thing I will note on that, notice that the arms are really solid and robust on both sides. A lot of guns have come out with this ambi slide release as kind of an add-on to an existing generation, and there's often complaints that the one on this side doesn't work well. Well, there's going to be no problem with that. That arm's just as robust and thick, and it comes into kind of a U-shaped mechanism up here. So you're going to have no problem with this working. I don't care which side of it is that you're grabbing a hold of, it's just going to work for you. Now if I move to the slide, you've got your typical dual recoil captive spring like they've had in, even the later Gen 3s went with this. Here's your GMB barrel, the Glock Marksman barrel. Here's the wear I talked about. They have a tendency on all the Gen 5s to finish wears within the first box of ammo. It wears fairly quickly, and then it stops. It won't wear past that. You can't feel it. If you run your finger across it, there's no edge on it, and it'll do it a little bit here on the front of the barrel hood. There's no gouging or anything else. It doesn't affect the function. And again, because the finish does penetrate a little bit into the metal, even though you lose the black, it's still going to protect it. It's got your standard Glock. It's kind of what I would call machine polished. It's not a highly polished feed ramp, but these things eat everything. I've never had a problem with a Glock that wouldn't eat even the worst junk or the best ammo. And if I put a little light in there, you can kind of see the rifling. And it's kind of course, hard to see on camera, but it's a hybrid between polygonal rifling and conventional rifling. Move it around. Right there, you can kind of see it. So it's got the grooves like conventional, but it's also got the rolling humps like the polygonal. So this does actually, Glock claims that it's the most accurate Glock ever. Most handguns are far more accurate than the hand that they're in, even a high point. But this barrel does seem to make it very easy to shoot the gun well. The groupings on it are quite tight. And even when you're shooting at this thing at a 100-yard gong, you can easily ring a gong with this thing. So it works well. Now if we move over here to the slide, with one difference. You really wouldn't be able to tell what generation this slide is. It looks identical to any of the others, other than the fact that the drop safety, which of course this is a drop safe gun like all the Glocks, is elongated and ramp shaped as opposed to round, which is one of the the changes they made on the Generation 5. Other than that, it's typical Glock, well machined, nothing fancy. There's nothing in here to make it pretty, just make it work. And everything is smoothly well machined, which is typical of a Glock. Putting it back together is almost as easy as taking it apart. In some cases, actually easier. You put the parts together on the slide. The recoil spring on Glocks tends to seat well every time. You don't usually have to mess with it to get it to work. Line it back up on the frame, and you're back in business. So it's an easy gun to own, it's an easy gun to shoot, it's an easy gun to maintain. There's a lot to like about it, and with kind of catching up with some of the features of some of the competition, it's kind of putting them in a position where they really needed to be. A lot of the complaints with Glock is they weren't keeping up with the times. Many guns were coming out with the ambi features, the forward serrations, and all the other features that you can get on XDMs and many other guns, and Glock was kind of taking some heat for that. Now the funny thing about this, when the 19X came out, one of the cool things about it is it was a factory, tan gun. They called it Coyote. And a lot of people had complained that Glocks are boring. They're always black. They don't come in any of the other colors. So they did one in a different color. And when we did the review on that, some of the comments we got were, well, if that was black, I'd buy it, which is kind of funny. Well, here's your black 19X with some extra cool features added on. So if you're looking for a little bit larger gun, it's a good choice. One other thing I'll mention is it does have a bit of a beveled mag well. Make it a little bit easier, and it's got a little bit of a flare at the front. And also no Gen 5 finger biting cutout. That little cutout here they put here on some of them for grabbing the magazine that likes to bite bigger hands. This one won't do that. Actually, really good choice. If you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share and subscribe. If you subscribe, click that bell so you get notified when we put out a new video. Please check us out on Facebook and Patreon, and have a great day. Thank you.